Welcome back. So today, we're doing a deep dive that, well, it really flips the script on how we tend to think about one of the most fundamental ideas in a democracy,
Yeah.
free speech.
It does. We usually worry about it vanishing overnight,
Yeah.
some big dramatic censorship law gets passed.
Right, like a single event, a tipping point.
But the sources we've looked at, they suggest we're looking in completely the wrong place. The reality is much quieter, it's more systemic.
So free speech doesn't just disappear with a bang.
It erodes. It erodes because the political systems themselves stop rewarding things like tolerance and disagreement, and instead they start rewarding caution, control, short-term thinking.
Okay, that's a huge idea. Let's unpack that. We're going beyond the usual legal definitions of free speech here.
Way beyond. We're going to look at a factor that almost never comes up in these debates, the electoral system itself, how it actually distributes power.
And that's the mission for this deep dive.
Exactly. Because here's the uncomfortable thought at the center of it all. Elections don't just decide who gets to govern.
They decide how safe power feels once you've won it.
Yes. And that feeling of safety, or the lack of it, that's what directly impacts how much criticism a government is willing to tolerate.
It's a fascinating insight. If power feels absolute, the incentives push you toward control.
But if it feels shared, you have to negotiate. The system is shaping the behavior long before a leader even thinks about silencing a critic.
So let's start with a system that many of you listening will know very well. We'll use the UK as the main example from the sources. First past the post, FPTP. Can you describe it not just as, a way of voting, but as this high-stakes, winner-takes-all event? Why does winning feel so existential in a system like that?
Well, it's really down to the math of it. FPTP creates what's often called a winner's bonus.
Okay, what's that?
It means a political party can get a huge commanding majority in parliament. I'm talking over 60% of the seats sometimes.
Right.
All on a minority of the actual national vote, sometimes as low as, say, 35, 40%.
So you don't even need half the country to agree with you to get total control.
Precisely. And the result is this incredible concentration of power. The winning party controls the government, the executive and the parliament, the legislature, at the same time.
And because of strict party discipline, the whip system,
Yeah.
there's very little to stop them for years.
Exactly. There's almost no internal check on their power for a full term.
I've never really thought about the psychology of that. If winning is everything and losing means the other side comes in and just undoes everything you did.
It becomes catastrophic.
Yeah. So where does that leave room for dissent?
It doesn't. The whole mindset shifts from, let's say, long-term stewardship of the country to just survival. The only goal is to hang on to that incredibly powerful but also very fragile position.
And if survival is the only thing that matters, then criticism is no longer just criticism, it's a threat.
It's a liability, absolutely. The
Yeah.
perception of risk just completely changes. Dissent inside your own party, that looks dangerous. It could break your majority.
And criticism from the outside.
That starts to look like sabotage. And any kind of public controversy becomes a risk to be managed, to be shut down, not a debate to be had.
The sources make a really critical point here. This process, this narrowing of acceptable speech, it doesn't even require new censorship law.
No, not at all. It's much, much more subtle than that.
It's a quiet thing.
It's institutional. The big players, not the government, but employers, broadcasters, social media platforms, regulators, they stop asking the simple legal question, is this lawful?
And they start asking a different question.
They start asking, is this worth the risk?
What kind of risk are we talking about here? In an FPTP system with a government that holds all the cards.
It could be anything. Financial penalties, losing out on government contracts, a sudden regulatory crackdown, or just, losing access, being frozen out.
So a TV channel that runs a really critical documentary might start to worry that this powerful centralized government is just going to make their life difficult.
And so they self-censor. They see the trouble coming before it even gets there.
That's the key, isn't it? That institutional fear achieves the same thing as a formal ban, but no politician ever has to cast a controversial vote.
It creates a culture of silence, a climate where it's just safer not to speak up. And that happens at every level.
Okay, so that's FPTP, existential politics, concentrated power. Let's switch to the other model from the sources, proportional representation, or PR.
Right.
They describe these systems with a great phrase: messier politics, calmer power.
It's the perfect description, because PR systems are designed to do one thing above all else: accurately reflect the national vote. And that completely changes the outcome.
So no winner takes all.
Almost never. What you get consistently are coalition governments.
Which means power is, by its very nature, diffused. It's spread out.
Exactly, it has to be shared. That means you're in a state of constant negotiation, not command. The winner's bonus is tiny, or it disappears completely. Elections are very rarely all-or-nothing affairs.
So how does that change the incentives we were just talking about?
It changes them fundamentally. In a PR system, your opponent today could very well be your required coalition partner tomorrow.
Okay, so you can't afford to treat them like the enemy.
You can't burn that bridge. You can't treat disagreement as if it's treason because you might need that other party to help you form a government next year.
So disagreement becomes normal. It's just part of the process. It has an institutional home.
It's just the sound of the system working. Power is expected to rotate, not to entrench itself. And dissent isn't seen as sabotage because there isn't one single ruling entity to sabotage.
But this is where people criticize these systems, right? They're famous for gridlock, for being slow and full of messy compromises. Couldn't that paralysis actually damage the trust you need for a healthy public debate?
It's a totally valid point, and PR systems can be incredibly frustrating. But the sources argue that the slowness, that inefficiency, that's actually a feature, not a bug, because it protects liberty. Decisions take longer, which means it's much harder to ram through a bad idea quickly. And because no single party feels that absolute existential pressure, the quiet silencing of criticism is much harder to pull off.
There are always other partners in the coalition who can object.
There are other layers, other checks. The system itself makes that kind of overreach inconvenient.
It's not about politicians being nicer people.
It's not about virtue at all. It's about mechanics.
Okay, let's tie this back directly to free speech. Why does this structural difference, how power is distributed, matter so much, even when there's no official censorship going on?
Because when you zoom out, you can see the exact conditions where free speech thrives.
And what are they?
It survives best in systems where power knows it's temporary, where criticism is just routine, not some shocking event, and crucially, where losing an election isn't an existential crisis.
In that kind of system, tolerance is actually the most rational choice.
It is. You tolerate tough debate today because you know you might be in opposition tomorrow, and you'll want the same rules to apply to you then.
So tolerance is a byproduct of distributed power.
Exactly. Whereas in those fragile all-or-nothing systems, tolerance starts to feel like a liability, a risk you have to manage. And so speech isn't banned. It's just quietly managed.
And there's another layer here that the sources point out, which is the link to long-term thinking.
Yes, this is a really deep insight. Proportional systems are consistently linked with longer policy horizons, more stability.
Fewer huge policy U-turns every time a new government comes in.
Think about a massive infrastructure project. In an FPTP system, one government might approve it, knowing full well the opposition's main promise is to scrap it the second they win.
Which leads to total instability. Nobody can plan.
But in a coalition, you can't do that. You have 3 or 4 parties at the table. You need broad buy-in to get anything done. That forces you to think long-term.
And that same dynamic, that long-term thinking, supports free speech.
It does.
Yeah.
A system that expects to be around tomorrow can afford to hear difficult truths today. A short-term system, one that feels it could all be over at the next election, it just wants to control the narrative now.
Get the quick win.
And that urgency, that focus on narrative dominance, that is the enemy of tolerance.
No, we have to be really clear. PR is not a magical solution. It's not a free speech utopia.
Absolutely not. And the sources are very clear on this. Proportional systems can still restrict speech, they can be painfully slow, and sometimes they fail to protect minorities.
But their main defense is that frustration, that gridlock.
That slowness is the protection. It means that just as they struggle to pass a good law quickly, they also struggle to ram through a bad one that stifles dissent.
The difficulty of unilateral action is the safeguard.
That's the whole lesson. The system makes abuse inconvenient.
Let's apply this to a country like the UK, which the research uses as an example. There's often this belief that free speech is just ancient, settled, ingrained.
Right, that it's just part of the culture. But the finding is that it has always depended on the willingness of power to tolerate being criticized.
And when the electoral system concentrates that power so intensely,
tolerance shrinks. It has to.
Yeah.
Speech doesn't get banned. It just becomes conditional, risky, something you have to think twice about.
So bringing this all together, what's the real lesson here for anyone listening who cares about this. It seems to be that free speech doesn't survive just because it's written down in a constitution.
Or just because people believe in it. It survives because the system makes abusing power inconvenient.
The laws and the courts matter, obviously.
Of course, they're essential, but they can't hold up if the underlying political system is constantly rewarding short-term control and a fear of losing power. That systemic pressure is the foundation everything else is built on.
So the sources conclude that free speech is, yes, legally real, but it's also historically narrow, culturally fragile, and, most importantly, system-dependent.
Which leaves us with the final thought, the real challenge for you listening. If we want robust free speech, the question isn't just about the laws we pass.
It's about the system itself.
It's about asking what kind of system encourages power to tolerate being criticized, even when it hates it, even when it feels deeply, deeply unfair.
That's the ultimate systemic question, isn't it? It affects everything.
Everything. Because free speech lasts longest, not where you have virtuous leaders, but where losing power is survivable, where disagreement is routine, and where power expects always to be temporary.
That, according to the sources, is the real foundation of tolerance.